Our business forum today, the pros and cons of program trading. Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns, and Kidder Peabody, all major practitioners of computerized index arbitrage, the most common form of program trading, have announced in recent days that they've stopped doing it for their own accounts. And Merrill Lynch did the same today for all accounts. They're all responding to pressure from mutual funds and other institutional investors who blame program trading for some of the excess volatility in the stock market. Joining us to discuss this controversial issue, Larry Zicklin, a managing director at Neuberger & Berman, an investment firm that's begun a PR campaign against program trading. Harrison Golden, New York City controller, who's also chairman of the Council of Institutional Investors. And also here in New York, Joseph Rosen, an expert on computerized trading on Wall Street and a partner in Rosen, Kupperman Associates. Thank you all for joining us. Mr. Zicklin, let me put the first question to you. Why have you gone this extra distance to put ads in newspapers lambasting program trading? What's so bad about it?
What's so bad about it is it adds a volatility to the American market that we can't tolerate. It discourages individual investors from remaining in the market. It discourages investment, discourages pension funds. It eliminates pension funds, mutual funds, and individuals from the market, and raises the cost of capital by lowering price earnings multiples.
Now, are you talking about very specifically index arbitrage trading, or more broadly the use of computerized trading techniques?
I'm specifically talking about index arbitrage trading, although I think all program trading causes some of that. But certainly index arbitrage is the greatest villain.
Jay Golden, is index arbitrage program trading bad?
Well, the way in which it's affecting markets is bad, and we need to look at the result, and the result tells you that if you want orderly markets, if you want Americans to be comforted that they're not dealing in a rigged situation in which they have the ability to compete on a level playing field, then this situation has got to be regulated. It cries out for government regulation, and there are steps that can be taken in an orderly fashion by the federal government which will tend to reduce the kind of disorder that's introduced by program trading.
Do you, however, favor what is being done by the large securities firms in pulling back, at least in the case of most of them, from trading in this way for their own accounts? Is that something you applaud or not?
It isn't enough. It's laudatory that leaders in the industry, perhaps responding to customer complaints, perhaps recognizing the long-term danger to orderly markets which these practices represent, are showing leadership, but that isn't going to be sufficient. You are going to have people who are going to continue to engage in these practices. You're going to have the risk of ragged markets, of wide fluctuations, of disorder, of the ordinary investor being frightened out of the markets. That's going to continue unless the government steps in and does what only government can do, establishes the kind of floor regulation that's critical to make this into a level playing field.
I'd like to come back to that point in a moment. Joe Rosen, in the case of computerized trading, that's your area of expertise. Is it, in fact, this index arbitrage that is causing the volatility? Obviously, this itself is a subject of some controversy.
Doug, I'd have to differ with the two other guests to some extent. I agree, certainly, that there's a great concern, as there should be, with extreme excess volatility in the markets, and I'm sure that every player in the market would agree that we want to do what must be done to prevent any kind of meltdown, quote unquote. But let me mention something that Harrison Golden had mentioned in terms of a level playing field. I think that the markets today have become just so professionalized. I go one step beyond the term that's used, mostly institutionalized. I think it's really professionalized. And to talk about a level playing field, we're never going to have that. If I can use perhaps a poor analogy, would one ever think that the Little League champions, whether it's Taiwan or the U.S., could ever have a level playing field if they're playing the Oakland Athletics? I think not. What I think is important here, and I do agree with some of the steps that have been suggested to cut down on extreme volatility in the marketplace, but program trading in and of itself is just perhaps a symptom of a more important environmental factor, and that is the increasing professionalization, but even more important and certainly related to that, the short-term attitudes that investors have today.
Mr. Zicklin, what about this point that in a way program trading is simply maybe accelerating moves that would happen anyway, and therefore is a reflection of the marketplace?
No, I disagree absolutely. It's causing the move. It's not accelerating them. All you have to do is be down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and watch the spreads widen for a moment, see the orders being generated by computers, watch the orders come down, millions of shares, tens of millions of dollars, everybody stepping back. Nobody wants to buy during that period of time, actually causing the volatility. It's not a symptom. It's a cause.
But again, it goes back to this question. These are machines that may be executing, but who makes the decision? It's human beings.
No, the machines in truth make the decision, because when the spread reaches a certain level, it kicks off a program. Certainly somebody presses the button and says that's enough, but the same person that presses that button is a person that presses the button in other firms at the same level. And just to bring up a point Jay mentioned about people coming and going from the business, it doesn't matter who comes and who goes. If there's a profit opportunity in that business, if that spread exists, someone will fill it. If it's not the member firms, it'll be the customers. If it's not the customers, it'll be foreign customers. Someone will fill a profit opportunity, and that's why the rules have to be changed.
But can I jump in for one moment, Doug,
sure,
if I may? Again, I don't want to quibble about academic studies, but I think what we have here as well is something of an institutional thing. To be perfectly frank, I'm undecided whether it's a cause or effect. That may be secondary, but one can certainly bring reams of data and statistical studies by people in Chicago versus people in New York, whether it mitigates volatility, increases volatility in and of itself. That, I suggest, may be somewhat secondary. There is a problem here of investor confidence. And I think what needs to be done, if I may anticipate perhaps other suggestions, I think we should be honest with the individual investors out there. With all the trends, the buzzwords that we hear and talk about, globalization, 24-hour trading, automated trading, et cetera, what has been going on for a great deal of time is becoming even increasingly a factor, that of professionalization. Individual investors in and of themselves have as much a chance of beating Peter Lynch and Fidelity Magellan or beating Paul Tudor Jones in the market as Little League champion teams have of beating the Oakland Athletics. And if we get that across to investors, I'm not saying get out of the market. I'm saying know what the market is, what it's becoming, and certainly take certain steps. And there have been so many studies, you need a scorecard to keep track, but many of them are important. They have good suggestions for hitting the volatility, whether or not the program trading itself is the cause or effect.
But it seems that, again, going back to that issue of small investors' confidence, in the absence of any real curbs on program trading of this variety, the little guy is going to continue, won't he, Jay, to feel, hey, I'm just priced out of this game. I can't compete with institutions.
Well, Mr. Rosen is confusing professionalization of the markets with artificial distortions of the markets. He's right that if you define level playing field to mean that everybody has to have the same intelligence, the same ability to access information, the same ability to digest it, to understand it, that you can never achieve a level playing field. But if you understand level playing field in the way that we interpret it in law and the way it's interpreted in regulation, it means that some should not have the opportunity to bring distortion into the marketplace. And that's what program trading is about. It doesn't mean that the individual investor is necessarily going to bring the same tools, the same sophistication, the same information, the same ability to assimilate as can the larger institutional investor. But it does mean, if you eliminate or regulate program trading, that he will have an opportunity to be able to participate in a market that he does not see as rigged and as so organized that he cannot possibly participate in a way that doesn't eliminate his chance to compete fairly.
You, though, also you represent, Jay, a group of institutional investors as well. Is it in the interest of institutional investors to have small individual investors more content, feel that the market is as much their market as that for an institution?
Unquestionably, it's in the interest of the American capital market system that capital be accessible from large numbers of Americans, individuals, institutions, and that none be put in a position in which they feel that the markets have been so distorted that they can't participate fairly. And that's what program trading does.
But Jay, may I comment on that?
Very quickly. I'm afraid we're running out of time.
I agree with the last point that you made, and I think what we need to do is get away from many of us, and certainly not you gentlemen, but many people in the market are afraid of change and have this fear of the unknown, and perhaps have even this Luddite view of computers. I think we should be looking forward. None of us here today will recognize the way the capital markets will look in 5 years with more automated trading, and I'm hoping that as we go more towards automated trading, there will be a much more fair playing ground for individual investors as well as the institutions.
Joe Rosen, Jay Golden here, Larry Zicklin, all of you, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And